America is gone. The America we know is gone. It is no longer. It's only a matter of time to see the judgments worked out on America, and it's a deserved judgment. Now, we watched when God judged Israel, when He judged Judah, He would judge them, and then there would be a righteous king, and there would be a reprieve, and there would be blessing, and then another evil king would come and go knock down notch by notch by notch. And we've been watching America going down, except for one thing and one thing only. America is dead except for a revival. Now, the revival that we will experience will not be typical to historical revivals, where there's a lot of emotionalism, there's a fanfare, there's a church swelling, there's a new issuing of the church membership. I don't believe it's going to happen that way. In fact, I believe this revival has started 20 years ago. I believe that you're part of that revival. It started with moms and dads who realized that they wanted something more for their children than the school system and the public sector was giving them, and they wanted to raise a family that was willing to learn how to depend on the Lord, but that made them not fit in some of the mainstream churches that they were attending, not fit in the Christian culture that was there. That's where the movement began. We have to understand that when the pro-life march came, we realized that 51% already were pro-life, and most of them were 20 years and younger. In another generation, 75% of Americans, based on the youth culture, will be pro-life. Why? The revival has already started, and you are proof of it. We have more interest in moral purity in the younger generation we've had for 10 generations historically. Why? Because they're sick and tired of the sexual garbage and the broken relationships and the fragmented home and the dysfunction of generations. And they know it. They've seen it, they've tasted it, they've been part of it, and they're saying, give it to us straight. I have a gift. You have a gift. The question we have to ask, I have, first of all, the gift of a life, and then I have a gift of a gift. How do I use that in context of a revival? Because I'm not Charles Finney. I'm not John Wesley. And I'm not Billy Graham. So when I think of revival, I think of those people. But that's not who I am. And yet I'm called, because I was born in this time, in this season, with a gifting by God to be part of His work. If we have an emotional revival, it cannot be sustained. How do you engage people? How do you connect to people? What gives you authority to speak? Jesus spoke as one having authority, not as one of the scribes and Pharisees. What gives you authority in a person's life? How do you get it? How do you turn this monologue into true Christianity where it's dialogue, where it's community? Church isn't enough of Christianity. So what is the church going to look like in the days to come? It's funny, when we have the rise of the mega church, we actually have the decrease of Christianity in America. The principle of discipleship is not about the president. It's not about politics. It's not about the pastor. And when revival came to the early church, do you know where they found them? They found them in the home of Lydia, in the home of this person, in the home of that person. They went smaller rather than bigger. Okay, why? Because what we're talking about is a shift, a moral shift of responsibility. The one thing that's central to the gospel from Genesis to Revelation is the word responsibility. Why? Because the essence of sin is an irresponsibility to God. And the essence of the Antichrist gospel is always blaming somebody for you not being godly, is always making excuses, is always rationalizing who you are, is always withdrawing yourself and protecting self. That is the essence of the Antichrist gospel. It's not dying to self. Jesus Christ was the only person from the beginning of time to the end of eternity that took full, complete responsibility to reconcile us with God. He's the only one who had the guts to do it. He's the only one who had the ability to do it. He's the only one who had the desire to do it. None of us want to be that godly. But if we will follow him as Christians, then the one thing that must characterize Christianity is the word responsibility. There are three basic dynamics that make earth in God's design of earth. The first one is boundaries. Do you notice that God defines everything by boundaries? He separated light from darkness. He separated the upper waters from the lower waters. He separated the land. He put a boundary around them. He put a boundary around himself. He gives animals territories. He gives stars orbits. He gives the sun and all the planets orbits. He gives them boundaries. Everything God does, he puts a boundary around it because that's what defines it. It defines its responsibilities. This is your boundary and this is your responsibility. He makes male and female. And he gives them different, not one's better than the other, one planet better than the other. They're different than the other and they have different responsibilities. So the first essence that defines God's creativity is boundaries. And the second one is responsibilities. Within a certain jurisdiction, a frame of reference, you have been given a gift, a jurisdiction, a life to occupy, and you have a responsibility to give an account for. And within that responsibility is a thing called tension. The world is made on tensions. North Pole, South Pole, positive ions, negative ions, male, female, different gifts, different genders, different races, and different experiences, and he creates tensions. And when the world is healthy, it exists in an equilibrium of healthy tension. When it's unhealthy, it's either hyper and has an infatuation with excitement and highness and super sensuality, or it has an infatuation with death. And our culture has both right now. It has an irresponsibility of taking from others who are living responsibly and living irresponsibly at their expense. And it has a need to violate every boundary known to morality. There's really no such thing as lawlessness, even though we know that lawlessness is a correct biblical term. Because the lawless, the wicked, make it legally their right to violate your boundary and confiscate your children and your morality and to define and jeopardize your children. They will never stop until they destroy righteousness, because they legally must define that they have a right to what you have. So they're violators of boundaries. Okay? Now why is all that important? Because this is about responsible discipleship. Unless we make disciples, we will not have the people to handle the adversities and the difficulties in the days to come.